Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Let's Talk Arsenal fan series, where I'm joined by a person that you will surely recognise from the Arsenal community to get a little bit more insight on themselves and their thoughts on the current state of the club as well. I'm very happy to be joined by Goals Arsenal correspondent Charles Watts. How you doing, mate? Are you well?
I'm good, Tom. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Very good. Oh, I say that. It's been too long since Arsenal last played, to be fair. This international break is dragging on. The fact that we don't play till Monday makes it all that worse as well.
I know. It's so annoying as well. I think the one thing about not playing in Europe this season, you thought, oh, I've got some nice 3 p.m. Saturday kickoffs to enjoy. And now we've got Monday and Friday night coming up.
Yeah.
Two weekends about Arsenal, basically. Again,
they knew that we liked it, and they've taken it away from us. Is what's happened. But no, it's fantastic to have you on the show, Charles. A lot of the listeners have been leaving comments like, "Can you get Charles Watts on? Try get Charles on." And so I'm glad that you're here, and I'm sure that a lot of the listeners will appreciate your time. As I said at the start, this is kind of a series in which we go a little bit deeper, and we have a bit of more of an in-depth chat about our guests. And I want to kind of start with where things began for you and why you got into football journalism, because even I know from my perspective, and speaking to James Benge last week as well, not from his perspective either, that it wasn't always the first thing that cropped into our minds that we wanted to do. But was it for you always something that you wanted to get into?
It was, actually. I think, well, basically, it was when I realised I wasn't good enough to play football professionally. Yeah. I thought, what's the next best thing? And it is to get paid to watch it and to write about it. And it was always, I wasn't very good at school. I was pretty rubbish at school, to be honest. I was spent more time out of school than I did in. For the last couple of years I was in it. And my sixth form years were like 96 to 98. And in the 98, we did like this school booklet. I was doing English, but like I said, I didn't do too much of it. But one of the things we did was produce this school sort of magazine type thing. And it was at the time of the 98 World Cup. And I sort of took on the World Cup section of that, doing a sort of review of it all, how it all went. And just before that, around the same sort of time of that, I got something published in the Gooner. It was a letter, actually, in the letters page, having a go at Michael Parkinson for his Daily Telegraph comment, column, something he wrote about Ian Wright.
Yeah.
And I sent that in. I got that published and saw my name in it. And I was like, oh my God, that looks so cool. My name's in that, in the magazine. And then obviously I wrote the stuff about the World Cup in 98. And just from then on, it was always in my mind that was something that I really wanted to do. And I left school after my A-levels and I went off, did the whole traveling thing for a year, went around the world and came back. And once I got back from that, there was nothing else I really wanted to do. I got myself onto a journalism course then, and it all went from there, really. I didn't immediately go into sports journalism or football journalism or anything like that. I started off as a junior news reporter, and I was a news reporter for a good few years before I got all my sort of past my exams and senior exams. And it wasn't until then that I moved into the sports desk at the Reading Chronicle, one of the local papers around here. And so yeah, that's how it all happened, really. And it was definitely something that I always wanted to do.
In regards to kind of the period you spent covering Reading, was that obviously a club that you're not necessarily as, I want to say passionate about, because I don't know you well enough to know your passion for Reading Football Club, but at the same point, knowing your love for Arsenal, what's that compare like? Is it trickier to cover a club with the same kind of guile, or was your ambition to move forwards always carrying you through that period?
No, I wouldn't say it was tricky. I mean, I live down the road from Reading. I live in Maidenhead, and it's not far from Reading, and so I knew about the club and stuff, and I really threw myself into it when I started there. And I had a few different periods covering them. Like my first job on a sports desk was at the Reading Chronicle, but back then I was kind of writing the sports pages for their sister paper, the Bracknell News, and covering Reading as kind of the second man, third man, really. And it was at the season they got promoted to Premier League with 106 points in the Championship, so they were sort of riding the crest of a wave. And then I had 2 years there being the second man covering their stay in the Premier League, and I really got into it. But then I left that paper, went to the local round here as a on the sports desk again, but covering like Maidenhead United and the local football scene around here. But it was more of a sort of deputy sports editor type role.
Yeah.
And then I went back to Reading at the evening paper there, the Evening Post. They sort of headhunted me, took me across there when their Reading reporter left, and I was like the main guy. And I spent a good few years there, and I really threw myself into it. And I treated it as if I was not Reading fan, but I knew what Reading fans wanted and stuff, and I acted like that. And they appreciated it. I got really well with the Reading fan base, and I tried to put as much passion into it as I possibly could, like I was a Reading fan. And I remember the semi-final, Alexis Sanchez scored twice at Wembley when Adam Federici let that one through his legs, and a really weird day for me. I was in the press box, obviously reporting it as a Reading, as an Arsenal fan, but on social, for all my followers, and sort of cheering McCleary, having not cheer, but put passion into the way I was reporting. It was a tricky day, and I was close to those Reading players, and Federici was probably the player I was most close to in that squad, and I was absolutely gutted for him when that happened, seeing him crying afterwards and being sort of going part. It was just a really, really weird day for me, that one. And but so I tried to put all the passion into it that I possibly could, but obviously it wasn't the team I supported. It never would be. It was just me trying to do the job as best as I possibly could to keep the followers and the readership as entertained as they possibly could be.
So was based on that, and kind of you said towards the latter end of your time covering Reading, that FA Cup semi-final period, was there anything about that sparked more of a desire to really push towards becoming Arsenal? Was that kind of a turning point, or was it just something that happened on the journey that you then pushed towards it? Or do you think that convinced you in any way to push towards covering Arsenal?
No, it was always in the back of my mind. It was something I wanted to do, but when I actually got the move, when I went to Football London, and I mean, Tom and Tom, it was kind of him and another guy, John Birchall. It was their brainchild, the whole Football London thing, and I knew Tom well from Trinity Mirror and Reach. He was up at Huddersfield when I first met him for the Examiner, covering Huddersfield, and I was at Reading, and we knew each other pretty well, and we sort of bonded over the whole Arsenal thing, because we're obviously both big Arsenal fans. And when they launched Football London, they got in touch, Tom got in touch, and they kind of had me in mind to be the Arsenal guy. So it wasn't something, it just came up, I wasn't expecting it or anything like that. I didn't know about the talks to launch Football London or anything like that. So, in my mind, it was that absolutely the ambition that I wanted to be to cover Arsenal. But when the opportunity arose, it wasn't something I was expecting or anything like that. I was perfectly happy at Reading. I wasn't looking to leave at that point. Reading is a mad football club, and so much stuff has gone on there in the last few years. As a reporter, it was a fantastic club to cover. You had promotion attempts, you had absolute crisis moments. You had I was there covering and breaking news stories on takeovers, the club going into administration, having to sell players to pay tax bills. It was an amazing job to cover, a fantastic time, and it taught me so much about the industry. And I never really I never wanted to be a national newspaper journalist. It never, I loved local journalism and being able to really focus on one club and be like the main guy at that club. And at Reading, I could walk up, go into the training ground, walk around it, speak to the players, speak to the coaching staff. It was a completely different world to your national report or your Premier League in the modern era, where it's the case of park in a car park at a training ground, get marched upstairs, don't leave the room. Manager walks in, does his questions, walks out. There's no rapport there or anything like that. It's not like the olden days, but in a local level, it still kind of was, even at championship level, and I loved it. And that was what I always really wanted to do. People used to ask me, do you want to be a national reporter? And it just didn't really appeal to me, that whole scene, covering different clubs every other week, and being at Spurs one day, Watford the next day, and all that, and the whole hustle and bustle of being a London national newspaper reporter as well. The stories you used to hear about what it was like, it just never really appealed to me. And so I was perfectly happy at Reading, but then London launched, obviously, and it was different. It was kind of on a national level, but it still felt like, and the whole ethos of it was for it to almost be like a regional type thing. So it was very, very different, I thought, and it really appealed to me. And obviously, the fact it was Arsenal, that was just something I wasn't going to say no to.
How did you find the transition? Because you're very comfortable knowing all the surroundings at Reading and then going into a job where you've got to cover Arsenal. Did you get like a lot of help, or was it a lot of kind of independent work to build up those relationships with players, agents, connections, and all of the like? And how difficult is it in those moments to build those relationships up from scratch?
Yeah, well, no, you got no help whatsoever. It was all starting from scratch. It was really difficult. Like I said, at Reading,
Yeah.
I was absolutely the main man. I was the main reporter for the area, for the club. I was the sort of trusted source that everyone went to.
Mm.
And then suddenly you're thrown into Arsenal with absolutely no contacts whatsoever.
Yeah.
This huge worldwide club with an established group of reporters who cover it again for nationals. And it's not easy walking into a press room at a Premier League football club when you don't know anyone, don't know anything, and it's just kind of the nature of the beast. You don't necessarily get the most help from everyone. It's a competitive business, a competitive industry at the end of the day. So it was really, really difficult at first, and it took a lot. It took me a good few months to sort of get into it. And Football London as well. It was like we were joining something that was new. It wasn't no one knew of us. It was a real. Obviously, Football London now has grown into this huge beast with. I wouldn't even know how many reporters there are and people who work there, and you will. But when we were there, with the original lot, there was like 7 of us or 8 of us, and that was it. Like sitting around the desk at Canary Wharf, not having a clue what we were doing, just absolutely starting from scratch. And
it's great considering. I mean, when I joined a few months ago, I joined as a new team of 21 people, just in this new team that's only started a few months ago. So to see
it was
that,
honestly, on my first day, on launch day, it was my first day, and it was at Canary Wharf. So it was me, Tom, John Birchall, and I think Ollie Harbord was there that day. I think he came that day, but it was Arsenal playing Bournemouth. It was a 3-3. We were 3-0 down. We came back.
Olivier Giroud scored and did the scorpion kick celebration.
Let's get back to the halfway line. And then Alexis threw his gloves down on the floor afterwards. That was the first day. That was launch day, and I drove. It was just basically just turned up at the desk. It was just John and Tom were there, and me. And I'd had a nightmare. I drove up there. I drove to Stratford and left my car at Stratford. The plan was to leave my car at Stratford Station, get the tube into Canary. I got a flat tyre just as I was arriving in Stratford. I had to limp into the car park, the multi-story, and then wait for about an hour and a half for the AA to come because I'm rubbish with cars. I can't change the tyre to save my life. So I ended up being about an hour and a half late on my first day, and we had the Bournemouth game that evening. And it was just a mad day, but I always remember it. And to think what Football London is now, what it was then when we started, when absolutely no one knew about us. We were trying to compete in this huge industry. We were a website, it's only a website. We didn't have a paper for the first 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is. Google didn't even rank us. So you're writing all these stories that you're putting lots into, and how it works in terms of when online stuff now, it's all you're very much looking at the figures and how the stories are doing. And we were putting blood, sweat, and tears into this website, and no one was reading it for ages because we had no Google presence or anything like that. No one on social knew us, so even when you tweeted anything out, no one really read the story because I had about 6,000 followers at that time. They were all Reading fans, they were Arsenal fans. So it was a really, really difficult time. And for a long time, I thought, what am I doing? I was perfectly happy and settled at Reading and enjoying it. And it took a good few months to really sort of get into it all and not think about the old days, what I had been doing when I've been doing it, and was pretty comfortable. But now I look at it what was that, 5 years ago, something like that. It's best move I ever made.
So obviously you spend that time there at FL, and you build up not only contacts but reputation, and gradually growing kind of that follower base, and also growing the views on the pages. I think I was reading through something you wrote in the fact it was getting up to 10 million page hits per month at times, which is incredible to grow from where it started to where it was. And eventually you move on. Now, how did that kind of movement from FL to Goal happen? Was it, again, another approach, or is it you moved like just wanting a different challenge, or how did it go?
Well, no, it was just, Chris, who obviously we kind of ended up doing a job talk, me and Chris. Chris obviously was leaving. He told me he was leaving. and he said that, you know, I think you'd be really good to as coming over here. And you know, I've been at FL for a fair while. Fancy something new, perhaps. If and I went and spoke to them. They wanted to speak to me. We had a couple of meetings, and then they offered me the job, and I was very, you know, what they said appealed to me. It was a change of scenery. You know, it was a far more established worldwide sort of brand than Football London. That's not having a go at Football London, because I had blinding time there. I loved it.
Of course.
But it just came at a good point for me of changing things up a little bit. And yeah, when they offered me the job, I kind of jumped at it. But it was very mixed feelings. You know, like I said, I loved my time at Football London, and the team was fantastic there. You know, I still get on with everyone there and see them whenever I can, and speak to them whenever I can. And I'll forever be indebted to Tom and John for the opportunity they gave me back in the sort of startup days. But it was just the time was right to make the move, and it was an exciting opportunity.
You go from one media outlet to another, covering the same club. Have you noticed, like, what kind of differences have you noticed from going from one to the other? You obviously Goal.com and DAZN now, with that connection there, it's so global and massive. Is there more pressure on you to generate kind of those stories and find the stories and get even more, say, page clicks than what was happening at FL?
No, I think it's a little bit opposite, to be honest. I think Football London, there was a lot more pressure to get in terms of page views and kind of worrying about how your stories were doing. It's not really been kind of one of the things that really interested me about going to Goal. You know, it was very demanding at Football London. Again, that's not a criticism of it. It just was. And after a good few years there, I kind of wanted to be able to concentrate a little bit more on building stories, and that, you know, rather than have to every day feel under pressure a little bit to produce something. And I think also the way Football London has evolved since I left is a little bit different from that now as well, certainly for the club correspondence, and it's moved more similar to the way sort of Goal operates as well. But back then, when it was a smaller team, there was a lot of pressure, and I feel, and it has been a Goal, I've been given a lot more license to have more freedom of how I work and not have to you know, be in touch constantly throughout the day and kind of feel like I've got to produce something, I've got to keep the numbers up, and that sort of thing. So it's been a bit more calmer, and I think it's certainly, I would say I produce more quality since I've moved to Goal in terms of the pieces that I've been able to write, because of that freedom and them being given more time to produce stuff. And it's more, again, I don't want to say quality over quantity, just because I don't want to sound like that's any sort of dig or criticism of Football London, because it's not, and there is no criticism. I don't have any criticism of it there. It's just the way the beast was. You know, we were trying to build Football London at that time.
Absolutely,
what it is now, to the fantastic side it is now. And but Goal was, you know, very much established. It wasn't about building Goal, and, you know, it was already established across the world, and it's such a huge thing. It still surprises me now how big Goal is around the world. And kind of, before I moved there, I just thought of it as Goal, you know, Goal.com in England. But it's not till you go there and you realise just how many editions there are around the world and how big they are around the world. It was a real sort of eye opener when I got there. But it's been great. You know, I've loved it.
Do you? I mean, suppose the last part of the puzzle for yourself, beyond just reporting at Goal, is entering the YouTube scene as well and embarking on that crazy journey. And YouTube is as I know very, very well, is a crazy place with a lot of kind of different. It's a different environment. It's a lot higher connection with the people that you're talking to, the people in your comment sections, with the community that you build and grow through subscribers and through the content you produce. And why did you want to jump into the YouTube scene as well?
You know what? It was, it kind of, I had no thought of doing it. And then I was in Greece, in Athens, for Arsenal versus Olympiacos just before lockdown.
Every YouTube creator is, just, you know.
The one that I was sitting at a bar in Greece. I think it was a bar. I think I might have been having breakfast. There was an outside sort of terrace in Greece. It was me and Sam Dean. I don't know if you know Sam, the Telegraph reporter. We were going up to see the Acropolis that morning, actually. And we were sitting having some breakfast just before we sort of started the walk up towards it. And he was the one. He said to me, with your following, with your social media, why don't you get into YouTube? And so a couple of people have mentioned it to me before, and I was like, I don't know. It's just another thing it will take time, and you've got to commit to, and things like that. And he was saying, I really think you should do it. I think it'd be really good, and you've got the sort of following across your social channels to make it maybe a bit of a success. And I listened to him, and I thought, well, why not? Why don't I give that a go? And so I came back, and I think it was a couple of days after I got back. I think my first video I did was from the training ground at Colney ahead of the Olympiacos second leg.
Yeah.
I think the very first video I ever done for YouTube was out on the training pitches, because we used to get like 15 minutes before the European game to do some filming there. And so, yeah, it was his idea. And I just, I got back, gave it a bit of a go, and it's just kind of exploded, really. And it's gone well. People seem to really enjoy it. And it's mad, actually, since sort of fans have come back into the stadium, because I did it was sort of launched all this just as lockdown was starting.
Yes,
and then really grew it throughout behind closed doors and stuff like that. And then, like, these first two home games of the season, or Norwich and Tottenham especially, where I've been sat in the press box, both of those games have been right next to the stairwell for the fans, and I've just been mad at how many fans have come up and shouted at me and come and shake my hand and say, "I watch you on YouTube," and it's like wow, that's really surprised me just how many people are watching it and kind of got to know me through it. So it's been great, it's been really a good way to sort of connect with a fan base, and I've tried to keep it. My whole thing of it, I don't want to sensationalize anything. I just want to try and be as on the level as I can be, criticize when I need to, try and talk positively if I want to and need to. And it doesn't, not everyone agrees with it. I get called a PR man by half the people, and get called a negative so-and-so by the other half. So you can't really please everyone. But I think
that's a really interesting angle, though, because obviously, and I want to pick it apart a bit and give you the chance to kind of, explain that side, because from my journey is the complete opposite way around to you. So starting off in YouTube, building a channel, and then going from where previously I was a full-time teacher, and then taking this route into full-time journalism with Football London now. So whereas the other way around for you, starting on that side of things, then going into YouTube and that growing from that. So I have now noticed that people say to me, since starting my job with FL, that I either sound different or speak differently on certain things. They think that's because there's like links, or I have to like please the club in any way. And I don't feel like I have changed. And I feel like there's no pressure on me to speak more or less critical of the club, because the club's gone through back-to-back 8th place finishes. We're in one of the worst periods in terms of a league competition standpoint in my lifetime as an Arsenal fan. And I don't feel like I hold back in that sense. And from watching your content, I don't really feel like you do either. But yet you still get the people that claim that you are. I mean, when you see those types of comments, how does that make you feel? And do you think there's any way of convincing them otherwise that it's not the case?
No, literally no way of convincing them, and I don't try to. I just don't even engage in it. It just makes me laugh. I mean, some people will get really wound up by it, I imagine, but I'm fortunate it doesn't really bother me at all. I mean, it's because I just know how utterly deluded all the comments are. It just makes me laugh. So safe in the knowledge of that. And how way off they are with all this mad stuff that they come up with, that it just makes me laugh. If anything, it's so wide of the mark. I mean, Arsenal have never once ever in anything I've ever reported or written, good or bad, said one thing about it. They've never been in touch, and they never would be. I just can't imagine it unless you made something up. That they know, as long as you're reporting fairly, which I've always felt I've reported fairly. I've hammered the club when they've been rubbish and when the managers have made mistakes. I've hammered Arteta plenty of times, but then if they do well, I say they do well, and that's all you can do. And you're just not going to please everyone, especially on social media, whether it be YouTube, Twitter, especially, which is just a cesspit most of the time. Facebook as well. You're just not going to please everyone. So, like I said, half the camp are going to, because everyone's so entrenched in their views, especially on social media, you're either at the moment, say for Arsenal, you're either Arteta in or you're Arteta out. And if you're Arteta out, you're very angrily Arteta out. Like, and if someone says anything that is, you know, even remotely praising him or the work he has done and maybe turn things around in last week, suddenly you're known as this Arteta PR guy, which is the biggest load of rubbish ever.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not bothered if Arteta gets sacked tomorrow. It doesn't change anything for me. It's just a new manager comes in and you go again. I've got no relationship with Mikel Arteta. I speak to him on Zoom, for God's sake. It's like it's not even in the room with him anymore, and haven't been since he's taken over. And people. So I love the comments about, oh, you're saying nice things about him to protect your tea and biscuits. It's like, what tea and biscuits? They're my tea and biscuits. I'm at home. Not even told me. It's such rubbish. And then at the match, there is no food. And we can't even sit in a press room. For the last 18 months, we literally walk straight through a door to the press box, sit there freezing cold for 4 hours during the winter, and then go again. We've literally had a cup of tea, which came about 6 months into lockdown. For the first 6 months, you didn't even get tea or coffee in the winter. There is no privileges or anything like that. No. You know, before lockdown, yes, you used to go in and get food at Arsenal, but that's not. I mean, you get food at work. It's just what happens, and they're gonna get that taken away from you if you ever go at someone. They couldn't do it. It's not even Arsenal who give the license for journalists. It's Dataco. It's another company that do all the. You apply for press accreditation for it. It's just people are so mad.
People don't understand the process. That's and the thing is, opinions from our perspective and from, say, reporting on stories, you have to be objective. And when you said there, when Arteta does badly, you criticize it. When he does something well, you praise it. That's part of what being a journalist is. Having an agenda, which is a word that gets thrown around on social media a hell of a lot, but it does exist. And there is, certainly from the level of anonymity that social media gives you, you can have an agenda. You can be anti or pro in either direction on any topic, be it the manager, be it the club, be it a player, whatever. And if you see anything that you don't necessarily agrees with your line of thought, those accounts will go and attack that. And one of the easy ways to go for journalists, especially those that are specific club reporters, is to, as you're saying there, suggest that there is some kind of benefit that you get by not being completely against or completely for a case in point, be it, as I said, the manager.
It's like, oh, you're protecting your seat, you want to go for free. It's like, I'm a season ticket holder. I've got my own ticket. If I wasn't in the press box, I'd be sitting across myself next to my dad, enjoying myself with a pint every week, rather than sitting there not drinking. I know if you ask me what I want to do on a match day, Arsenal versus Tottenham, where would I want to be? In the press box, sitting with my dad in my actual seat. It's going to be sitting with my dad. Actually, there's no privilege. It's just my job, you know, and I have to be there. If I had a choice, I'd be sitting in the stands, celebrating, drinking, and doing all that. So it just comes with the territory. And like I said, some people will be really bothered by it. Other people can brush it off. And I'm fortunate that I feel like I can brush it off and move on from it, because you just, like you said, you can't, as a journalist, you can't have an agenda. You've just got to be objective and call it as you see it. And if someone's doing well, you say they're doing well. If they start doing badly, you say they're doing badly, and you give your opinion as to why you think they're doing badly. And that's what I feel like I've done plenty of times. A lot of people say to me, you treat Emery really badly and you give an Arteta a lot more time. And I liked Unai Emery, and he was a really nice guy. And towards the end of his tenure, I wrote some pretty brutal pieces about him and the way things were going and the feelings behind the scenes. But that was what through my contacts from people I spoke to, I knew there was no coming back. There wasn't any coming back from what was happening with Emery. He was going to go. It was a matter of when it was going to happen. And he lost the dressing room and it just wasn't working anymore. I never had a go at him himself as what he was like, because he was an absolute, he was great. He was really nice. He tried so hard as well. He was welcoming to journalists. He really gave it a go, but it just didn't work out for him at Arsenal at all. But with Arteta, and he's had, you know, he is fortunate in a way to still be in a job. If he was at another club, he probably wouldn't be in a job, because 2 8th place finishes isn't good enough, and that's clear. But from speaking to people you speak to, you know, who in and around the club and in and around the players, especially, I've never got the feeling that it was the end of the road for him and that people wanted him out and that the squad had given up on him or anything like that. It's just different. It's very, very different in terms of the two managers. And so that's perhaps why some of the pieces I haven't wrote about Arteta in terms of, oh, he's lost the dressing room and stuff like that, is because I haven't been told that he has. But
the environment's different.
Yeah. Whereas before, towards the end of Unai, that's what the messages we were getting, not from the press office, like people like to believe, or people like that, because you get no help from the Arsenal press office.
Why would they?
It doesn't happen. You literally don't get help from the Arsenal press office. That's not, and it's from people. It's elsewhere around the players, around the club, around people you know. And yeah, it's just people are so way off with it, so way off. And it's not their fault. They don't know. They just presume they know, but they don't know until you're actually working in and around it. You just don't know what's going on. And people obviously presume they do. Some people think they do, but they really don't.
Yeah. The last kind of topic I wanted to cover with you, Charles, before I let you go, is the crazy, wacky world of the transfer window. Now, I'm not going to ask you to drop any kind of inside secrets on stories or interest, but what I want to know is more from a grounded perspective and this always comes from when I asked James about this last week as well. I read an article by Sam Lee from The Athletic, who wrote specifically about covering transfers as a journalist and the social impacts from kind of the online pressures of having to have the next story. And then if you tweet anything about them being tweeted about wanting news on certain players, on the club, if they're moving for someone on a contract, whatever. How have you dealt with that as someone that has broken plenty of stories and then has got that additional pressure of being someone that people want to hear more from and are expecting to hear stuff from every single window?
It's tough. I mean, honestly, I hate the transfer window with a passion. If I could,
you're going to hate it, really? Is that
I absolutely hate it, and it's because of social media that I hate it. It's so tough to keep a level head through it all because it is just the thirst for information. And it's not, I don't have a go at people for that. Before I was doing this job and I was working at Maynard Advertiser and things like that, during transfer windows and towards deadline days, I'd sit on Twitter the whole time, desperately hoping we were going to sign Higuain or Jan and Villa and be completely caught up in the whole thing and want to know more every single minute. So I've been on the other side of it as well, as a fan wanting to know more. But, as a journalist, it's really, really tough to deal with. It's just constant. You can't say anything without the desire to know more, or as soon as you say one thing, almost, within 2 minutes of something being out, that move the story on and people want to know the next thing that's happening. And it's really hard. And people get really angry about it and abusive, and, it's really tough to deal with. If I could, I would literally take the whole summer off. From the moment my kids finish school until they start, I would gladly take that all off and come back at the end of the transfer window. Like during this summer, I went away for 2 weeks, and it was so nice knowing that you didn't have to worry about it or write anything or talk, or not even write anything. You didn't have to deal with Twitter basically for 2 weeks. It was so nice not knowing that, because mentally it's really, really challenging. It really is, with dealing with it, and it gets tougher and tougher as well. I mean, it feels like you've got two different types. You got your Arsenal fans, your football fans, but then you almost have transfer fans who are more focused on the transfer window than the actual club at times. And you notice it once the transfer window shuts, they kind of disappear for ages, and you don't hear from them or see them. But as soon as the window's open, they're just in your mentions, comments non-stop the whole time, and it's just, you think, does it matter that much? And when the way a transfer works, there's not much to report either. There's interest. Once you've reported that, there's potentially talks or bid accepted or bid rejected, and then there's done deal. There's not much in between it. But nowadays, everyone wants more. It's like, okay, bid's been accepted, so where is he now? What's happening? Has he flown? Is he at the airport? What's happening? Has he had his medical? It's like, well, just wait a little bit. So it's tough. Like, and also it's not, I don't know if it's a worry. I'm not sure if I really consider it a worry, but if you get the transfers, the way it works, things can change so differently. Something could be so certain in your mind, and people who speak to something so certain, and then suddenly it doesn't happen, and you're forever remembered as someone who got it wrong.
Yeah.
You didn't even get it wrong. What you reported was right, but it's just the deal didn't happen in the end because something else broke down somewhere
How do
along.
you deal with that? Because I remember you wrote a piece about Arsenal's interest in Andre Onana last year, and obviously that's moved on, and Arsenal ended up going for Aaron Ramsdale instead and went down that homegrown route. And I remember seeing tweets. I mean, I know that you get a lot of responses. You're not going to see all of them, but I remember seeing tweets that were questioning, saying like, "I thought we were going for Onana," sort of thing, just generic stuff. So how do you do? Are you a serial blocker, a serial muter, or?
No, I tell you what, I've never blocked anyone in my life.
Really? That's because James Bench turned around and went, "Oh, I block everyone."
Benja loves it. Benja loves it. Yeah. No, I've never blocked anyone in my life. I've muted 2 people, and I'm not going to say who, but I've muted 2 people.
I could guess who, but carry on. Go on.
and never blocked anyone because I don't mind seeing it that much. It makes me laugh a lot of the time, and the muting appeals to me a little bit more because it kind of they don't know they're blocked and they think that you're actually seeing what they're writing, so it kind of makes me laugh thinking they've spent the time writing all that, but you can't actually see it. But again, I just don't really do it. So yeah, sometimes it's tough. I remember when I broke the Thomas Partey, the move for Thomas Partey on deadline day. I remember when I was writing that tweet and was about to press tweet, I've honestly never been more nervous in my life because I knew what that tweet was going to do.
Yeah.
And my thought was, if this doesn't happen now, if it breaks down, if something last minute happens and they don't sign him, I will through no fault of my own, because the tweet was right.
The information you have.
Yeah, the tweet was right, but it will always be thrown back at me for anything else you ever do. And because especially because that was so big, and you knew on deadline day exactly what that was going to cause, and the eruptions that tweet was going to cause, and the excitement it was going to cause. And then if it ends up not happening for whatever reason, it was going to it would come back on me for it. And
especially when other journalists have said the contrary earlier. I mean, David
exactly.
obviously at that point didn't have that same information as you, and he tweeted out saying it would take something spectacular for things to change, and that spectacular thing happened. But it's that. Do you find that? Is there an element of you that is concerns as well, that your colleagues, that you've written something or you tweet something that's to the contrary of your contemporaries?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. Yeah, it does worry. I mean, something like Partey as well. With that, I mean, I knew I was right, and I was on that. To actually go as far as tweeting that and writing that story, you had to know, 100% that you were right. And so I'd got to the stage, I'd checked enough, I'd double sourced, triple sourced. I knew it was right. So you kind of had that in the back of mind. At some point, you just got to go, I'm confident, I know this is right, so I'm going to do it. But yeah, I mean, at times there's plenty of worrying things, and often, like you said, the interesting point is when you're going up against another journalist who's saying something differently. So I remember for Romano, for Fabrizio, just after I tweeted that about Partey, he kind of put out a tweet about 5 minutes later saying nothing had changed and Atletico still hadn't received anything, and then for the next sort of half an hour after that, I was just getting constant messages with him added in saying, calling me a fraud. I was wrong. Someone else, and it's just like, oh, for God's sake. It is difficult to deal with. And,
did that make you second guess? Because I know that obviously Fabrizio is very well followed. He's like one of the highest, obviously, followed football transfer people out there, or however you want to describe him and what he does. But when he does tweet something out, you're now in the other bar. I just mentioned that you tweeted something to the contrary of David Ornstein earlier on in that day. 5 minutes after you tweet, you've got another massive journalist tweeting out the contrary information. Even though you said in that moment, you said you knew it was right, you triple sourced it, did that tweet second guess you? Did it make you think, do I need to go and quadruple source this now?
Not on that occasion. I knew on that one, but on other occasions, yeah, absolutely. You think, oh God, have I actually got this wrong? Has someone given me wrong information here? I knew with Thomas Partey, I knew that I was 100% right with that one. But there's definitely been occasions where someone will tweet something differently or write a story that's different. And you think, oh God, hold on, that's like totally different to what I've been told by someone that I trust, and I wouldn't see why they would have given me wrong information. But when someone else does say something different, it does definitely make you think, God, it sort of surprises you a little bit and think, how has that happened? But you got to you build up your contacts, you build up your network for moments like that, and you just got to trust in them and that your information.
Has it happened to
It's
you?
like the Onana stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was absolutely 100% right. I mean, it's on record as being right. It's definitely, you know, there's no doubt Arsenal were very, very interested in him. You know, they almost went for him before the January before.
Yeah.
But the whole doping thing had happened, although it hadn't come out by then. Arsenal were made aware of the doping situation and that the news was going to emerge very, very soon. He was going to be banned for 18 months. So obviously they moved on. They got Matty Ryan instead. Yeah. This summer they were very interested in him, but then they were hoping for a much bigger reduction in the ban that he got. It didn't happen, and again they moved on to somewhere else. But you know, it doesn't stop the fact that they were interested and they were talking. And you know, I know full well that was right. It's just, you know, not everything happened. Not everything ends up happening. From writing a story saying the club are interested in certain player to actually getting to club sign certain player, there is so many hurdles and so many things to go through. You know, it doesn't make the story wrong when you write it at the time that the interest is there. It just means that they didn't sign him. It's like when you go looking for a house, you look at 4 or 5 houses, don't you? And you don't go in.
I bought the first one I looked at, which is a weird thing, but yeah, go on.
I bought the third that I looked at.
Yeah.
But you know, and from looking at a few houses to actually then putting an offer in and then having the offer accepted and then having all the legal things go through to getting it. There's so many ways that deal can break down, and it's exactly the same when it comes to football transfers. So it's very, very different from saying that a club are interested in a player to actually then moving on and then signing him.
Last question, and then we'll be done, is just off the back of something you said then, is that when you tweet information about transfer or anything like that, it's kind of like it's really hard to be finite in any information, and always having said there is interest in a player or there is talks going on or a bid, and it's very rare that you see this player will sign at whatever time. That has the openness of the reporting of transfers and how much kind of leeway there is in tweeting, and the fact that things can change has obviously opened up this dynamic of accounts that aren't well sourced, accounts that aren't genuine, that some are even verified at this point, that there's a lot of doubt around where the information comes from, and yet some get it right, some, because there are people outside of football that do have contacts still and get good information. A very good friend of mine tweeted out the information about Raul Sanllehi being like leaving Arsenal when that happened, and like we both know him, but at the same time, is there, of course, our friend Mr. Feinberg, but yes, in regards to kind of those accounts, do they frustrate you? Is it a frustrating part of your job that they exist, or you just kind of laugh at some of the things that go out there?
No, they don't frustrate me. It's you know, each to their own. Good luck to them all, really. As long as they're not doing anything. It annoys me when certain accounts will take your work and something you've spent ages, you know, chasing down an interview, getting real exclusive quotes, and then putting it all out, and then within 5 minutes, about 10 accounts have basically put the quotes out word for word in a string of about 10 tweets, and you're just like, Jesus, can you not just tweet the story in one tweet rather than just basically stealing and lifting the work that you've spent probably weeks getting the interview sorted, then loads of time doing the interview, even more time transcribing the interview, then writing it, and then someone, you know, then accounts will just basically nick all the quotes, push them all out, and that's it. And so that annoys me big time. And accounts that, again, those sort of similar, maybe some aggregator accounts that will not, they'll put stuff out attributed to you that you haven't said, certainly in that way, completely out of context. And I remember one, no, I'm not going to name the account, but one put something out for me, attributed to me, and it was from my YouTube channel, something I've said in my YouTube channel, and that you're kind of saying it as an opinion, but then the way they tweet it, you're talking about something and it just talking about it as your own opinion, but then they'll tweet it and make it look like it's a fact that you've said this for a fact, like that, or they'll not even get the quote right, and they'll sort of quote you but not get it word for word, and missed out really key points that completely change the meaning of the tweet. That really bugs me. But so that does, but you know, some of the other accounts, I mean, it's like they just make me laugh. Some of the big ones, especially.
Oh, we all know,
I'm no issue with that, really.
Awesome stuff, Charles. Really appreciate your time, and I'm sure the listeners have as well. I know that they already know, but we always offer the opportunity. Tell people where they can find you.
Well, Twitter is at Charles_Watts. On Facebook as well. Just type in my name and Arsenal, and same for YouTube.
There you go. Make sure you're following Charles and subscribing to his YouTube channel, and make sure you're not misquoting him. Is all we would ask. So thank you again, Charles, for coming on. Really appreciate your time. And
no worries. Cheers, Tom.
No problem at all. And we'll see you guys very soon. If you enjoyed the video, please do make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the Gooner Talk if you haven't already. We'll see you tomorrow morning, as always, for the 8 a.m. news update show. But other than that, it's been a pleasure, and we'll see you soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.